Hello, UST students. I just wanted to go through the module that I want you to do this week. It's got 4 steps. So first, of course, reading the very last chapter for the general ed. The special ed has a few more chapters to still go, but of the Bambara book. And whoops, I've got this here. So the Bambara book, this is really where it's going to go into more around what the difference between Tier 1 and Tier 2 positive behavior supports are. And then, of course, you're going to watch this video, and then I want you to complete a Google form, and this is it. Oh, I can show you the actual one with your name, what grade level you teach, if you're an educational specialist, and then I'm going to have you at the end pick a behavior problem and then an intervention. And I will go through what I want you to do with that in this video. So just to kind of, okay, I'm going to take the video or my picture off, and just to kind of go through some of the things that, are the positives of PBIS is that it really does, like especially the Tier 1s, really do decrease unsafe environments, and they really increase positive interactions between students, and also they do increase academic instruction. Tier 2 actually helps prevent and decrease problems. It can provide daily monitoring so that you can do data-driven decision making. And it also, allows colleagues to work together to help support all students in the school. The Tier 3, which is more with the special educators for the most part, and then also specialists, it really is around teaching replacement behaviors and giving positive reinforcement and helping students really grow. So once again, I just wanted to kind of show you this. Oh, let's pull this down. This chart that we talked about before, where it is looking at the tiers of PBIS. So Tier 1 being universal, and just kind of coming up with a unified system that everyone participates in to help students navigate the school, make good decisions, work together, resolve problems, that type of thing. And then the interventions are really around prevention. Tier 2 is around more collaborative teaming. So this is where you have the student success teams. This is when you intensify the Tier 1 supports to kind of see how they're working, and you might add a few more. And this is really on remediation. So you found a student maybe that needs this extra support, and so then you're going to, based on the data that you collect, you're going to help support them. Those are both in green because those are both done by the general ed and the special ed populations. Tier 3 is the comprehensive assessment. This is where you do a very large assessment on kind of the nitty-gritty from all different areas. This is where you come up with modifications, visual supports, instruction on communication, but very specific interventions with people who are specialized usually in the field. This is just the Tier 1 prevention interventions checklist, and this is right out of your book, but I really wanted to kind of bring this through as you're saying, okay, well, should I be doing some sort of Tier 1 intervention? And so some of the questions that you can, ask yourself is, are the adults supervising throughout the campus? Do students perceive that teachers care about them? Do students attend school on time and every day? Are there any sort of minimal misbehaviors or even at-risk behaviors that you know about? Are the students engaged? Are they actually paying attention? I always, I'm not sure if I've shared this with you, but I actually was a behavior specialist before I was a teacher, and my job was to go into these classrooms. And oftentimes when I went into the classrooms, because there was a behavior problem, what I saw was teachers not engaging the students, kind of putting them over in another area. And so, I knew that a lot of their behaviors would decrease if they were actually attended to and learning. So that's a lot of the questions that you can ask. So you can pause this, you can write them down, you can check your book for that. So some of the things that we should be doing before we move to Tier 2, so this is the step that's in Chapter 1 of your book, and it's really around making sure that you have a beautiful environment, a safe environment for your students, reteaching them school and classroom rules, routines and procedures, reminding them, giving them cues about what positive behavior looks like, role playing, social recognition. Your book talks about peer tutoring, where the peers actually look for good examples of good behavior, and instead of tattle on each other, they tootle on each other. And then, of course, explicit instruction on social skills, goals, all those things, sending positive notes home. And then some Tier 1 interventions are the increasing the use of small groups, and then also helping your students learn what that means. This could be providing structured cooperative learning groups. It could be modeling, cueing, supervising. Having your students give interest inventory so you can figure out what they like and how you can connect the curriculum to what their interests are. Giving choice, so between 2 or 3 options. I'll be giving you choice at the end of this, so I'm excited to see kind of where you go with this. Providing brief but strategic and intensive one-on-one instruction. So this is kind of a 5-minute check-in maybe daily, or a 2-minute check-in. And then to kind of figure out what your student might need. And then also checking to make sure that you're being consistent with whatever the school-wide PBIS is, and really checking in with your relationship with your students who may have the more of the behavior problems. And are you being culturally responsive? Are you being compassionate and providing supports for them meeting your high standards, but not changing the expectations? So not giving any free passes, but saying, how can I help you so that you can get what you need and meet the school rules? The Tier 2 remediation, so this is maintenance check. This is, once again, this is out of your book. And it goes through some of the things that you can do. I know there's a lot of words. You can kind of pause this. I just wanted to kind of pull out some important things. And then there's actually on page 52 and 53, they have a classroom organization and management system assessment that you can use to kind of check in and see how are you doing as far as positive behavior supports in your classroom. This is a chart that I like to show students. So this is the evidence-based practices that have worked. So, you hear and school districts are required to use evidence-based practices, but oftentimes we're not actually told what they are. How do we know whether something has evidence-based or not? So this is a list of different practices. And then the EC is early childhood, EL is elementary, and then this is middle and high school. So these are the different interventions that work with these different age levels. So if we look at behavior, one thing that works at all levels is the antecedent-based intervention. So that's the ABC that I'm going to talk about in a second, and that your book also talks about. Differential reinforcements work. Extinction works, functional behavior assessments, which we're also going to talk about a little later, and your book talked about. Picture exchange communication systems, pivotal response training, prompting, reinforcement. You can see the self-management, social narratives, and visual supports all work. And I'm not sure if I said and for the communication and social skills, the peer-mediated interventions also work. So really kind of keeping those in mind. You can see visual supports work for almost everything, for almost every age, as does self-management. So let's get a little bit more into some of these. So now you're thinking, okay, I need to move this child from the Tier 1 to Tier 2 supports. They need more than I can give the whole class. And so creating the team within your school is usually the next step. So the team is general educators. Sometimes there's a special educator involved in this team, but it's actually not required. And usually there's an administrator and maybe some mental health specialist. One thing that's important is that everybody goes through ongoing trainings on interventions that work, and then they get time to plan, problem solve, and assess. So these are the regular meetings. This could look something like the design thinking meetings, as you're kind of trying to figure out how you can support your students. So the big things are proactive screening. Remember in your book they talk about the third grade and the middle school phenomenons of you can learn a lot about students who are struggling in both the third grade and middle school. You bring in multiple stakeholders and you look at multiple settings. And then you also look for risk factors. You see if there's any, the obvious, so the disciplinary referrals for like obvious behaviors, but also are there any quiet behaviors like depression or withdrawal? On page 61, they actually have a list of some really great screenings that you can do for this. And then also looking at the teachers have requested any, teachers have made any requests for assistance with that student. And then, of course, continuing your professional development and getting administrative support and communicating with the stakeholders. So letting the family know that you're concerned as well. Here's some ways to learn more about that the team can learn more about the students. So review of records, interviews and supports, an ecological or environmental inventory, self-determination skills, so seeing how well the students have these different skills. The ABC, which your book goes into really nicely, and then the cultural biases, so really taking a look at, is there anything going on at your school site or within yourself? On page 63, they go through and they have the facts to screen for Tier 2 interventions, which is really handy, it's 64 to 65, they talk about the fact, or they show you the facts checklists that any teacher can use to learn more, or the team can use to learn more about the student and what might be going on. And then on 63, they talk about the ABC, the antecedent behavior and consequence, which is really looking at what the behavior is and then what's causing that behavior, what's triggering it. What's the need for it? How often is it happening? And then following that up with what is the consequence of that behavior? And if you start taking a look at like, okay, well, how can we keep the antecedent from happening or change the antecedent, then hopefully the behavior will change and then the consequence can change as well. And then I just wanted to talk briefly about building a summary statement. So one of the things that often happens with students is, or teachers, is that they say, well, he's always having a rough time in math. And we don't know what rough time is, and always is it during, the entire math period every single day, or is there anything that you can do to kind of help them? So I put in this behavioral statements, so effective versus ineffective. So Bob will behave in class, or Josh will be compliant during classroom instruction. That doesn't really tell us anything about kind of where Bob or Josh are. Whereas Jacob's competing behaviors are defined as verbal or physical aggression, including name-calling, slapping, noncompliance with teacher requests, as evidenced by refusal to comply with the teacher's directives, and tantrums when presented with a task demand. So really give us an idea about what the behavior is. So on the Google form that I gave you, I asked you to write down what problem behavior you pick, and I would like you to try to put a behavior statement in there for the student who you're looking at for your case study, or the student that has any sort of concern. Just to kind of, your book has this all in there, but choosing the Tier 2 interventions and supports, there's a lot of things that you can do to really support the child. That they go into depth about the check-in and check-out, social skills training, first steps to success, and mentoring programs. So, the big thing is you want to make sure the Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions aren't too time or effort consuming. So, all right, let's jump to these behavior websites. So I would like you to explore all three of them, but you can go to one of them and choose your behavior. So let's just start here. This is the pbis.org, and I'm going to just scroll right here. So I'm going to go through and show you a little bit how this works. All right, so you can go here to research and you see Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports, plus school-wide positive behavior supports and mental health. So we're just going to go to the Tier 1, and it'll go through and it tells you about the different researches that is behind that. Oops. And you can see I'm going to hit now the school, and I can go through and see all of these different supports as well. I want you to kind of play around with this, but here's some Tier 1 supports, and they just go through and they give you a lot of information. It's a great website. The second website I want you to take a look at is pbisworld.com, and you can see they've got the home, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. They have data tracking, and I want you to just kind of pick one of these. So we'll just do impulsive, and then it goes through and it asks you if this is what the student looks like, because that's what impulsive is. You hit yes, and then it gives you a whole bunch of interventions. So I want you to kind of go through. You can pick a behavior, and then you can pick an intervention. The next one is pen.ca.gov. This is a great website if you're looking for any sort of documents that you might be able to use. So I always go to forms, and then they just have a whole lot of ways to kind of collect and monitor. They've got discipline. They've got accommodation. So this is just a great website to kind of explore. So let's go back to the, okay, so that is the form. You're going to give me an intervention, and you're going to give me a behavior issue. And then I'm going to use that information to make your groups next week. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'm always available by email. Have a great week, and thank you for all your hard work.